بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. باب ما يفسد به الصوم وتجب به الكفارة مع القضاء. Chapter on what breaks a fast and requires expiation. And here there are principles related to, and this is something important to diagram, what doesn't break the fast, what, and you can summarize into overall principles, right? Where there isn't wusul, وصول مفطر معتبر من منفذ معتبر إلى جوف معتبر على وجه معتبر, right? That a recognized invalidator enters through a recognized point of entry to a recognized body cavity in a recognized manner. Right? So there are certain things that don't break because that does not take place. And then there are certain things that are excused because they're simply not possible to avoid. Smoke, and things like that, right? The fly, etc., etc. Okay. Now, the issue of vomiting is tricky. Why? Because the qiyas of vomiting, if it's in the mouth, the qiyas meaning if we were to ignore the text, what would the ruling be? If you vomited and swallowed, what's the qiyas?
Breaks your fast.
It
breaks your fast.
Tawbah and 11 istighfar, Sidi. Is your mouth outside your body?
No.
If you swallow your saliva, does it break your fast?
No.
Why? If mucus gets it, if what's it called? Mucus? Phlegm gets into your mouth, you swallow it, does it break your fast? No, because it's part of your inner body. So the qiyas is vomit that comes into your mouth doesn't break. That's the qiyas. The qiyas was left because of the athar, the hadith. Right? But then what is the scope of the hadith? That's where there's ikhtilaf, the relied upon position. And there's a certain degree of ikhtilaf. Get the relied upon position that's in Nur al-Idah first before you try to say Abu Yusuf said, Muhammad said this, Abu Yusuf said this, etc. Get the relied upon position down first. Diagram it, understand it clearly. Once you know it and you can repeat it, etc., then say, okay, so what's the khilaf about it? And then go into the details. Otherwise, you'll be lost in the woods and you don't know the way home. Okay. Then Imam Shurunbulali gives us the key principles of what breaks the fast and requires qada. Qada and kafara. Kafara is punitive. Punishments are based on deterrence. Punishments are firm. But tudra bishubuhat, right? And kafara is similar to other punishments. It's meant to serve as a deterrent, to highlight the gravity of the contravention. So he gives us the key principle. So let's read the matn. He says, وَهُوَ اثْنَانِ وَعِشْرُونَ شَيْئًا. It is 21 things. Right? And this is تقريبا إذا فعل الصائم شيئا منها, if these are done by the one fasting, what are طائعا متعمدا غير مضطر لزمه القضاء والكفارة. Okay? So he mentions a few criteria. If these are done, right? طائعا, willfully, right? What is excluded by willfully? That what excluded طائعا is al-mukrah. متعمدا, deliberately. What's the opposite of deliberately?
A mistake.
Two things are it excludes al-khata and it includes al-nisyan, that which is done in error and that which is done forgetfully. غير مضطر, not in a state of necessity. So someone's dying, they're choking, right? They're about to faint and they ate. They're about to die, they're choking, etc. That's it, because that's an excuse. Now there's a critical issue that is not included, which is, right? So here, we have a micro assignment, right? After we finish the Maraqi, is that a beautiful practice that the Mauritanians have. They have the turra, like their mutun. They do two things with it: a turra and ihmirar, right? So they put essential notes and key details around the text, and you can see it. For example, the turra in the ihmirar on the alfiya, for example. These are official keynotes, which would be corrections, additions, principles, but very careful. There's a key detail here that is missing. What's the most important details missing here? Right? في أداء رمضان. Right? That qada only applies to ada of Ramadan. Number one. Right? 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 And so the qada of Ramadan is required if one does it. If you leave ikrah aside, right? You do it. There's ta'ammud, right? Ta'ammud, number one. Number two is ada Ramadan. The three key issues is there's ta'ammud. It was done deliberately. Number two, it was done fi ada Ramadan. You were fasting Ramadan. Number three is بجناية كاملة. بجناية كاملة. These are the three key conditions. It was deliberate. Right? It was deliberate. And under deliberate, you could include, of course, the issue that they did it willfully, right? And it was not unavoidable, right? So you could subsume it being طائع and غير مضطر there, right? Right? Under ta'ammud, you could exclude ikrah as well, and the issue of ittirar, but those are not normal cases, right? But the three, because it helps to, what are the three key criteria? It was done deliberately. And you could include muta'ammid, you could also include there, it's طائع and غير مضطر. Number two is, it's an أداء Ramadan. فلا كفارة في قضاء أو نفل. Right? There's no kafara in qada, there's no kafara in nafl, there's no kafara in the wajib. Right? It has to be ada Ramadan. The third is there is a jinaya kamila, and he'll describe the jinaya kamila. So what is jinaya kamila? Is actual intercourse, actual eating, actual drinking. And he'll define what is actual eating. أكل ما يؤكل عادة. أو يشرب عادة. أو يتداوى به عادة. And عادة, it's either معتاد عموما أو كان عادة له. It's either generally eaten, generally drunk, generally used as medicine, or you do that. This is really important to get because, even talib ilm types, they don't get this. Right? And the kafara, as we'll see in both this chapter and the one after, is there's any shubha lifts the kafara. The التقصير موجب التقصير is what? If you have shortcomings, قد يكون إثما, لكن if someone had shortcomings, right? Right? Now the other, and so there are nuances here, and that's why this is of the kind of chapters that you need to pay attention to, right? Because of the subtleties in this chapter, I'm just trying to give you a navigational map before we go through, is this difference between, and can you see the conceptual difference between eating something that has medicinal value and taking medicine. Right? Right? So there's a case, right? That, let's say someone took the morning after pill because they had whatever reason. We don't need to know why they took the morning after. They took a morning after pill. At 10 a.m. when in Ramadan. There's a difference between أكل ما يتداوى به. Right? Right? Eating that which is medicinal. Right? And what's another way you could view taking medicine at 10 in the morning? Anybody? Think of the chapters on fasting. Or anybody? Say Hamza. Someone took medication. Forget the morning after pill. Someone took medication they felt they needed at 10 in the morning. Technically, they could have taken it before Fajr. Technically, they could have taken it after sunset. But they took medication at 10 in the morning. Is a kafara required?
No.
Why not? Okay, don't say because you gave an answer on the answer service, silly. Right? See, because there's a difference between eating something, like someone's fasting. 10 a.m., they decided to eat something deliberately, and that thing is food, drink, or medicine, or medicinal. They had whatever, chicken corn soup, because they said it's healing properties or whatever. But what if they thought that they had an excuse from fasting? Right? Number one, right? They thought that taking medication, that they had an excuse for taking medication. Now, that may be sinful or not, right? That it wasn't, in fact, an excuse to break the fast, and we'll see the excuses of breaking fast, but that's a different case because لم يتعمد إفساد الصوم. This is خطأ. They thought that they had an excuse to break the fast. Turns out that they didn't. Number one. Number two, that people miss, what if you did not make the intention to fast? Is kafara required? Right? 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 So, we'll see this in what's coming up, right? So he says, إذا فعل المكلف الصائم مبيتا النية في أداء رمضان. Right? If they made the intention before Fajr in a current performance of Ramadan, right? So this is really important. مبيتا النية. They made the intention before Fajr. Because if you made the intention after Fajr, it's not, your fast was not valid according to Imam Shafi'i. That's enough for it to lift the kafara. If you made the intention before Fajr. A fortiori if someone intended not to fast that day. Right? They also said, and Maulana al-Tahtawi mentions this, also that you made the intention to fast Ramadan. If you just say, I intend to fast today, and you didn't have the intention of fasting Ramadan, although that's far-fetched. That's far-fetched, right? Right? وَلَمْ يَطْرَأْ مَا يُبِيحُ الْفِطْرِ بَعْدَهُ. And nothing happened after you broke the fast that excuses you from fasting. كَمَرَض, such as you falling ill. But the marad, it has to be, the becoming sick is from other than your action. So it's winter, you broke the fast, you say, okay, what do I do to get sick? So you get yourself wet and you run outside wet, so you get a cold and you get sick. No, بغير فعله. Right? You mentioned that. Or you just, okay, I broke my fast, so you stab yourself so you're bleeding, right? Etc. Should you do that? Jumana does not approve. Don't do that. You want to wave your finger? Yeah, she's waving her finger. Don't do it. Right? 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 Okay. So وكان فعله شيئا منها المفسدات طائعا, and one did so willfully. احترازا على المكره. This includes the coerced person. ولو أكرهته زوجته في الأصح, even if one's wife coerced one, according to the more sound opinion, right? Because they differed. Could is the هل you know الإكراه على الجماع هل يتحقق من قبل الزوجة, right? And it's conceivable, right? And we know from the hadith of الإكراه على الطلاق, there's an incident that the Sahabiya said, والله لا تطلقنني أو لا أذبحنك. That by Allah, you will divorce me, أو لا أذبحنك, right? That this was considered ikrah, right? 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 According to كما في الجوهرة وبه يفتى, that's a fatwa position. Because if the kafara, the ikrah, right, which is that there's the coercion, it has to be coercion. One's forced, with بالتهديد, right? بقتل أو تلف عضو بتهديد يصدق مثله, right? There's a warning and the like of it which would be believed, as we talked. If you should have seen it in باب الإكراه. به يفتى فلا كفارة. So if there's إكراه, there's no كفارة. ولو حصلت طواعية في أثناء الجماع لأنها بعد الإفطار مكرها, لأنها بعد الإفطار مكرها في الابتداء, right? Right? Even if afterwards someone continued willfully, right, in the intercourse, because if the breaking of fast happened coerced, then what happened afterwards is excused. But of course, the wajib would have been to stop, so it would be sinful, right? Right? مع وجوب الإمساك, right? وجوب الإمساك, right? One, rightfully, if one was coerced and then the coercion stopped, one is supposed to make imsak for the rest of the day. And we'll be seeing that, right? متعمدا, deliberately, احتراز به عن الناس والمخطئ. Deliberately, this excludes both the forgetful and the one who broke it in error. So the nasi, the forgetful, the fast remains valid. The one who made a mistake, their fast is broken. They have to make qada without kafara. And if it was broken due to their remissness, they should make tawbah as well. غير مضطر, not compelled. إذ الاضطرار لا كفارة, إذ المضطر لا كفارة عليه, because the one coerced, there's no kafara upon them. لزمه القضاء, they have to make قضاء. استدراكا للمصلحة الفائتة, right? The qada is to make up the benefit that they've missed out on, right? What? Of course, and more than that, right? Because the qada is, القضاء يجب بما يجب به الأداء, right? Because the qada is due out of what the current performance is due. The one morally responsible, when something enters their dhimma, how does it exit? If it enters their due, how does it exit?
By ada. By performing that action.
No, not only.
For qada bimisl.
There's in three ways. بأداء أو قضاء أو إبراء ممن له حق الإبراء. Right? يعني الحق إذا دخل في الذمة لا يخرج إلا بأداء أو قضاء أو إبراء ممن له حق الإبراء. Right? Any right, if it enters into your dues, it does not leave it unless يعني الأداء is to do it within the specified time. Or qada is to do the same thing that was due outside of the time. Or ibra, or the one who has a right, someone borrowed $1,000, they owe $1,000. It's in your dhimma. The person who has a right of absolving it, absolves it. خلاص خرج من الذمة. وَلَزِمَهُ الْكَفَّارَةِ. Right? And you can say لَزِمَتْهُ الْكَفَّارَةِ or لَزِمَهُ الْكَفَّارَةِ because kafara is metaphorically feminine, right? لِكَمَالِ الْجِنَايَةِ. So what, this is the third thing that we share, right? بِجِنَايَةٍ كَامِلَةٍ. It's a complete crime. It's actual eating, actual drinking, actual intercourse. Non-complete contraventions, right, require qada, but may require qada if invalidation takes place, but do not require kafara, as we'll see. Right? And right? Right? And there's an interesting discussion, right? Which is that, okay, what if the sultan deliberately breaks the fast, right? Because the kafara, as we'll see, the kafara, you can do what? What's the first thing you can do? Free a slave. Or
Fast 60 days uninterrupted.
fast 60 days, or
Feed 60 people.
60 people. So I said some of the Hanafi said the sultan should not be allowed the option of freeing a slave. Because, for the sultan, freeing a slave would be the easiest of things. And you can read this in Tahtawi. It's kind of cool, right? Right? You can see. But others said, no, they can also tahrir raqaba, right? Free a slave. And now there's a couple of other points that Tahtawi mentions, and sometimes so Tahtawi, amongst other points that he mentions here, there's a long footnote, is that وَذَنْبُ الْإِفْطَارِ عَمْدًا لَا يَرْتَفِعْ بِالتَّوْبَةِ. Right? So of course you need to make tawbah, but tawbah is not enough. Deliberately breaking the fast, it's not lifted just by tawbah, but you need to make kafara. But it's also not lifted just by kafara, but you do need to have tawbah. Right? And they bring an issue of, just like jinayat al-sariqa, but they also say, they mention that if someone committed zina with someone else's spouse, then they have to excuse themselves from the person. That's a theoretical discussion. But they do make a point that if you do wrong someone and they don't know how you wronged them, you can seek general excuse from them. This is called al-ibra' an majhul. But that's only where it would be the lesser harm, right? Because you can't go you can't, like, for example, Abdul Majid Abdul Jalil takes $1,000 from Sidi Abdul Latif during his dars and said, if I ever wronged you, could you forgive me? And Sidi Abdul Latif, being Latif, says, for sure. He said, I can keep the $1,000. Right? But, if someone, accidentally, someone, cracked an inappropriate joke about somebody and they didn't find out, etc., you can seek a general apology. That's a point of fiqh that's practical. Okay. So he tells us, right, What's a major contravention? He says, وهي الجماع في أحد السبيلين. It is intercourse in either pathways. أي سبيلي آدمي حي, of a living human being. على الفاعل وإن لم ينزل, وعلى المفعول به, on both parties, even if no inzal took place. Right? Right? And they mention different things theoretically because people have these questions, right? Sometimes you say, why are you bringing jinn in and stuff? Right? Adami, they said, other than oneself. Right? أي لو تصور الجماع بأن كان خنثى مشكل or whatever. أما إذا كان جنيا, right? أو جامع نفسه فلا كفارة. That's the ruling. Right? وإن لم ينزل. Right? And you can see the reasoning in Tahtawi. Right? This is والدبر كالقبل في الأصح. يعني the rear and the front are the same with respect to this, according to the more correct opinion. Why? لكمال الجناية, because both are complete crime. بخلاف الحد, as opposed to the حد punishments, لأنه ليس زنا حقيقة, because it's not actual zina, لأنه لا يؤدي إلى الولادة. Right? And that you can read that in حد. But then there's discretionary punishment for it. وكذا الأكل والشرب, likewise eating and drinking. وإن قل, even if a little bit. سواء فيه, أي في المفطر, ما يتغذى, أي يربى ويقام البدن به الغذاء, وهو بالغين والذال غذاء المعجمتين اسم للذات المأكولة غذاء, هي على وجه التغذية. Eating and drinking a little, whether the thing is of what is consumed as a, for nourishment, and the matan continues, أو يتداوى به, right? Or it is used for medical treatment, right? Okay, so the eating is for the nourishment, right? And of course, nourishment, it's not a value judgment that is this nourishing, but يتغذى به, that the like of it is consumed for the purpose of eating and drinking, right? That's the mafhum of ghidha. It's not if you eat nourishing things, you require kafara. If you eat junk food, it doesn't, right? So this is that. What is food, right? Why? Because it's concealed. What if someone had dirt? What if someone had salt? All these furu'a that arise, and people do these things. قال في الجوهرة واختلفوا في معنى التغذي. They differed on the meaning of nourishment. فقال بعضهم أن يميل الطبع إلى أكله وتنقضي شهوة البطن به. Some said it's what people incline towards eating and that it fulfills their desire for food. وقال بعضهم هو ما يعود نفعه إلى إصلاح البدن. Others said it's that whose benefit returns to the interest of the body. وفائدته فيما إذا مضغ لقمة. Its benefit is one chewed a bite of something. ثم أخرجها. Then one took it out. عافانا الله وإياكم. ثم ابتلعها. Then you chewed it again. فعلى القول الثاني تجب الكفارة. According to the second opinion, right, that it's something that nourishes the body. You ate a bite, you took it out, put it on your plate, let's say, and then swallowed it. It's still nourishment, requires kafara. According to the first opinion, you took it out. Would someone want to eat even their own chewed up food after putting it on the plate? Would you? You'd eat it? No. You wouldn't want to eat it. So the kafara, according to this difference. فعلى القول الثاني يجب الكفارة وعلى الأول لا تجب. And on the first opinion, it's kafara is not required. وهذا هو الأصح. And this is the more correct opinion. Right? That if someone did do that, kafara is warded off. Right? That if they chewed the food, put it out, and then swallowed it again, fast is broken. They are sinful. Kafara is not due. لأن إخراجها تعافها النفس. لأنه بإخراجها تعافها النفس. Like by taking it out, now the nafs, and the human temperament normally dislikes eating that, so it's not considered ما يتغذى به عادة. Right? The first meaning. It's not considered something that you'd normally choose to eat. كما في المحيط. وعلى هذا الورق الحبشي. And this, the same thing applies to الورق الحبشي. What is الورق الحبشي? Did anyone check?
They're type of plants.
Yeah, of course. But what type of plants? Right? So this is what now it's generally called qat. Right? That is common in East Africa, right? And common in, because they would chew it and take it out and then chew it again, right? والحشيشة والقطاط إذا أكله فعلى القول الثاني لا تجب الكفارة. According to the second opinion on this, the kafara would not due. لأنه لا نفع فيه للبدن, because it doesn't benefit the body. وربما يضره, and it may harm it. وينقص عقله, and it diminishes the intellect. وعلى القول الأول تجب, and according to the first opinion, kafara is due. لأن الطبع يميل إليه وتنقضي به الشهوة, and the desires fill through it. انتهى. So this is all a quote from the Jawhara. The Jawhara al-Nayyara of al-Haddadi. Right? Imam Shurunbulali now makes taqreer of it. Right? He says, قلت وعلى هذا البدعة التي ظهرت الآن. And on the basis of this is the innovation that has been manifest in our times. وهو الدخان. Right? And it is الدخان. And they also refer to it as tatan, which is a tobacco, right? And some of the background of the discussion is discussed in Tahtawi. So he says, إذا شربه في لزوم الكفارة, right? The difference regarding whether kafara is required for smoking. He says, نسأل الله تعالى العفو والعافية. We ask Allah for afu and afiyah. Do you have an intaha after this? Yeah. Everyone have an intaha here?
Yes.
Just open Imdad, please. So smoke has a discernible body, like you can see it. So smoking breaks the fast for sure, right? There's no قولا واحدا. Has an intaha, and there's an intaha before it too. Just keep a bookmark there, yeah.
Probably it wasn't invented by kind of Johar.
Yeah. Okay. just check this issue because it's strange, because it's the Sahib al-Jawhara is pre-tobacco. Okay.
Maybe that before.
Okay. And there's more coming about tobacco later. About now, some people like attacking mashayikh and so on. There's two things. Tobacco is not permissible, right? Smoking. Now, what is the ruling of smoking? There are two pathways amongst the ulama in our times, right? One is that it is just straight up haram. Smoking is haram, full stop. Now, the issue that arises that there are principles of harm in our madhab. In general, قواعد الضرر are three. ما كان سببا مباشرا للموت أو تلف عضو. Right, that which is a means of death or loss of limb, that's which is direct means of death or loss of limb is haram, right? And they use the example of تناول السم القاتل, taking poison, for example. Or something else that would be direct means of the same. Water that you know to be mixed with a lot of glass shards, and you know it's glass shards, it'd be haram to drink it, because you drink it, it would cause death. Secondly, ما كان سببا إلى بغلبة الظن إلى تلف إلى موت أو تلف عضو, and they also mention زوال عقل, right? But that which would be a means to shore loss of life, limb, or loss of intellect, would be makruh tahriman. So it's not direct, it's indirectly to loss of life, limb, or intellect would be makruh tahriman. But then what about something that there is harm in it, but there's gradual harm? It's makruh tanzihan. So some of the ulama looked at this point, and if you look at these three levels of darar, the single act of smoking, where does it fall into? It would fall under the makruh tanzihan, because the one act of smoking, will it cause you loss of life, limb, or loss of intellect? No. But that's the qiyas, but the istihsan, right? And that's why most of the mu'asirin, the fuqaha of the mu'asirin would say it's, or if they are applying the principle of the Hanafi madhab, is that if you look at the fact that, so there's a difference. If someone took a whiff of smoke, did they commit a sin? It's best to consider that yes. And don't give this tafsil to people, because they abuse it. But what's the danger in smoking? Smoking is addictive, right? And they've deliberately made it addictive too, right? So if someone starts smoking, then number one, it is likely that they'll become addicted to it, because of the various substances that make it addictive. Number two, there's also a societal consideration, right? That in countries where people smoke, the public cost of smoking is grave. Right? Public cost in terms of medical care entailed, right? But also it harms others, secondhand smoke, right? So you could allow yourself to be gradually harmed, but you're harming other people as well, right? And so on, right? But there. وبأكل ورق كرم وقشر بطيخ طري وكافور ومسك تجب الكفارة إذا صار ورق الكرم وإذا صار ورق الكرم غليظا لا تجب. And eating grape leaves and the qishr, what's the skin of melon that is soft, because there's soft melons, right? This is important. Soft melons whose skin is edible. People eat it. Yeah, you can see it online, actually. It's very interesting, right? As opposed to hard skinned, because do people normally eat hard skinned melon? No. Wakafur, camphor, because people do eat it. Misk, right? The misk, natural musk, people would eat it. So kafara is due. Because huwa mimma وإذا صار ورق الكرم غليظا, but thick grape leaves, right, that become bitter. It's لا يؤكل عادة, right? It's normally not eaten. Kafara is not due. Right? 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 So it goes back to what is يؤكل عادة, kafara is due. ما لا يؤكل عادة, kafara is not due. أو يتداوى به, or is used for medical treatment. كالأشربة, such as such as intoxicating drinks, because people would use it for medical treatment. For example, they would make fermented stews. So the ashriba is not just wine and alcohol, but also, for example, fermented stews, right? Many cultures, they would have a stew that would ferment and people would eat from it, right? And they'd use that also للتداوي والتقوي, right? For medical treatment or for taqawi. And they'd use different fermented drinks for that. والطباع السليمة تدعو لتناول الدواء. Sound temperaments incline towards taking medication. لإصلاح البدن, right? For treating the body. فشرع الزجر عنه. So they fall under the warning of not doing that which contravenes the fast. Okay. And then we'll see a number of derivative issues. I have to go here. I have to actually please make dua. I can catch him. I have to call Imam Zaid. Barakallahu ta'ala bikum. Do gather your questions. We'll take the questions next, inshallah. But this chapter on qada, the differentiating between what doesn't break the fast, what breaks the fast requires kafara, and what does not require kafara, to make dabt of that, the 3 points that we mentioned are very significant, right? وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.